Welcome to the N1 Fitness podcast. Today I'm super excited to have Austin Malleolo on the show. Austin is the head coach at Reebok CrossFit 1, which is actually at Reebok HQ in Boston. Austin has a BS in exercise science, and he came on my radar via some YouTube videos on Output TV, and I just really identified with his mindset and his approach from the get-go. So I wanted to have him on the podcast to share some of his insights with us. Welcome, Austin.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction.
Of course, man. And before we dig into your story here, I was checking you out on Instagram, and one really sort of important question jumped to mind. Do you own any T-shirts?
No, I actually, I just make sure that I lose them right before the cameras come out.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't blame you, man. You're pretty jacked. So, no, that's cool. So I kind of want to start this off from the beginning. So I know you had a bit of I don't know, I guess a troubled youth and stuff like that, quote unquote, but you bounced around from, I think it was 4 different high schools, right? What was it like having that be sort of inconsistent as far as friend groups and just adjusting constantly and bouncing around that much when it wasn't necessarily like your parents were traveling for work or anything like that? It was for different reasons.
Yeah. I think a unique aspect of sort of that time in my life was a lot of it was self-induced, which is somewhat unique, where I went to I was in private school for half of that time. And so I went to a school where, there was essentially like a 9th grade, which was like the first year of high school, but it was the last year of this private school. And then I went to another private school, Williston, Northampton. And then, that was really like when, I guess you could say if there were 4 wheels on the vehicle, they started to get wobbly before they all started, kind of flying off the vehicle over the next handful of years. But, I think the biggest thing was, I was at this great school with all this great opportunity, and I wanted to then leave private school because there's so many rules and there's so many restrictions, and your public school friends could do all this sort of stuff. And again, just looking for any excuse really in hindsight to just ruin a good path that you were on, which is just a classic, irony of the situation. But then I went back to public school, where that's where I had 1 year. And then that's essentially when I got in trouble, and got this wilderness camp, I guess, it would be a nice way to put it, was out there for 2 months. And then I went down to Virginia to a therapeutic boarding school for 2 years. And then, so and so I took, I graduated a little later from high school, and then I went to college after that. But, I think hindsight's 20/20. In the moment when, for me, I was drinking, I was partying, and I was just, I was doing probably what a lot of high schoolers did, but like a mantra in my life, for better or worse, was always, hey, if you're, do nothing in moderation. Anything worth doing is worth overdoing. So, that was taken to an extreme when I was a youth. And, I think it's easy to be blinded by whether it is, emotional difficulty, psychological difficulty, when, you're running from something, right? Because you don't truly feel what you need to feel, which is usually the root of a lot of that distress. And that's something that, in hindsight, it's easy to talk about kind of how it felt, what it was like. But, I think probably the most sobering part of, was all of that is, when I got sent away and shipped away down to the woods in Utah for 2 months, and then, into Virginia for 2 years, how many people wrote me, or, was wondering where I was. And it was, you could fit the amount of people on one hand, and I think that's probably a big piece of, like, you can create relationships, you can create acquaintances, or you can just have, a lot of interactions that mask themselves as, the predicated to. So I think that's the best way to describe that, where, you can trick yourself that you have a good relationship with someone or your acquaintance with someone, but really you just have a bunch of interactions that are adding up to no substance. And I guess that was probably the best way to describe those 4 years for me. and it was all self-induced. It was my, when it was all said and done, that was all my fault, but that was the reality of the situation.
Cool. And so what would you say was sort of the biggest thing that you got out of that outdoor school setup that almost sounded a little bit military-ish, actually?
I mean, the best way to describe it was, it was either go, you had two options. I had two options at the time, more or less I was, ignorant to. It was like either go to jail or, just go to this program. And so, I mean, but yeah, by no means was it, a camp, just, 2 months in the woods where you're stripped of all essentially your identity. You have a pack that you survive off of, and you hike, 10 to 15 miles a day. You're essentially just out there, and, a therapist comes out and talk to you twice a week to kind of assess where you're at. And, the people that you're side by side with, just think about, you probably knew a handful of kids that in your high school days that you're like, man, that kid's really screwed up. That kid's can't seem to get it right. And whatever they were doing, multiply it by 5 to 10. And those were the kids I was out there with. And so from a learning perspective, it's one of those things where your life is pretty small when you're that young, and it's amazing because as we get older, it's life only gets more complex. Your world only gets bigger. And you kind of look back, for me, I remember sitting in the woods against a tree and I was going into my senior year of high school, and I was, missing senior year football and, missing all of these things. Right. And it's funny how that was such a massive piece about it. But, in the moment, perception is reality, and the magnifying glass is on whatever is important in your life. And for me, it was just like, man, this is real because I'm missing all of these milestones that you kind of think about, at a big turning point in most people's lives, end of high school, beginning of college. And, it was, though I wasn't a part of any of that because of where I was. I think that was pretty real. And it's just funny because that was only the beginning, yet it seemed like it was the biggest deal, but yet it was, that 2 months dovetailed into 2 years down in Virginia. So it's so funny when all you know is what's next. All you knew was that you were hiking every day. So your world was so small where that's all you did was, put your boots on and hike.
So when you came out of that 2 month experience, what was sort of the big turning point for you? When did you really sort of, get things together, I guess?
Yeah. So, well, I can tell you that if I were to give you the short answer of it, I left the woods as it was called, and I went down to a school down in Virginia, which was a very unique school where it really just centered and focused on, a lot of your emotional well-being and areas of improvement from that perspective. Was down there for 2 years, left that campus 5 times in 2 years. So it was very unique, but eye-opening. And all the while, finishing up school, graduating about 6 months late, but nonetheless having school and having a good amount of introspective sessions, therapy sessions. And, you go through all that, and in the moment, you could sit here and talk about everything that you're aware of, but, went to college, and, so after that graduated, went to college, and that's sort of if you were to say, well, what was the turning point? Well, going through the woods, going through a Carl Brook school down in Virginia, that was a turning point. But still, that wasn't really it for me. I think that, and the reason why is, you're only as good as your environment and your responsibility of that. And in the woods, you're stripped of everything around you. And when I was in Virginia, you were stripped of almost anything that you can imagine from a cultural perspective that you would have in high school, where you had to go out of your way and work hard to do something stupid. if that makes sense.
Totally.
And then college, like now the antithesis of that, right?
Right.
Where you have to go out of your way and work really hard not to do something stupid. So this is a long way of saying when the turning point was me when I really hit rock bottom. And that was when I got kicked out of college because, long story short, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people, making the wrong decisions. And this was, I was a junior. There's a good amount of foundation in life that was laid at that point, like anybody. And having to talk to my father and tell him, someone that, has, essentially was responsible to, for, helping me out, essentially saving my life when I was, instead of getting arrested, sending me out to the woods, sending me to the school, like being there, helping me throughout all of that, kind of looking him in the eye and, knowing that I fucked up and that I let him down again. And, having to go through and talk to people about this, it was at the moment in life where, and I'm sure everyone has a moment, and I hope, gosh, not as grave as this, where you did something, said something, were a part of something you were so embarrassed about that you couldn't look someone in the eye or be around people. You were almost disgusted with yourself. And it was at that moment is when I had the turning point. And the turning point was essentially a realization of responsibility. And responsibility in every aspect that you can imagine. That it's so easy, and it was so easy, going through life to blame something else for what's happening to you. And what I realized in that moment was that no matter right or wrong, whether it was my fault or someone else's, it didn't matter. It was my fault that I got kicked out of school. It was my fault that I was in that position. I chose those people to hang out with. I chose to do that. I chose those interactions. It was having to take responsibility of that is so empowering. It's exhausting. It's petrifying because you have to own it, but it's no one else's fault but yours. And when I realized that, I was actually able to take ownership of everything in my life. My behaviors, my interactions, my communications, my thought, my reactions. And that was the turning point for me. And really, if you look at my life from where did you turn the corner? And, whereas when I tell people the story now that just kind of know my last, 10 years of my life, they look at me like that's not you. That's crazy. Like they would never believe me. And the turning point for that was at this point. And it was, I'm at home. I was kicked out of college. My girlfriend at the time, who's my now wife, she was still in school. So now I'm 4 hours away. I'm working construction during the day. I'm going to community college at night so I can keep my health insurance. And, I was 3/4, if not, 7/8 of a way through a college degree. And I had to do something, and that's where I started. I started personal training. I applied for jobs. I started personal training. I was working construction. I was going to school at night, and it was where I got my first personal training job. And I, of course, like at that age, I was the 4 a.m. like 10 a.m. shift guy that no one wanted.
Right.
And I never forget, because it was at that gym where a trainer introduced me to CrossFit. And it's, you look back and it's such an insignificant interaction that would have never been at that moment in my life if my life hadn't laid that path, if I hadn't taken the responsibility. And I found CrossFit there, and I did my first CrossFit workout, which was Fran, and I'll never forget it. And I did it, and I'm sure none of the reps counted because I'm sure it was partial range of motion. But I'm laying on the ground and throwing up in a garbage can, asking what the hell was that? And next thing you know, I signed up for my level 1. I had to take out 2 credit cards because they only would give me a $500 limit on each. And I got my level 1, and I bought the movie Every Second Counts, the original CrossFit documentary. And, like everything in my life, positive or negative, I went all in. That was when I started training for the CrossFit Games. That was in 2009. 2009. So that was, that was the turning point for me. And it was, and that's a quick and abridged sort of expression of my life, but it's something that it's so simple yet so difficult to have that moment.
Right, man. That's super, super powerful stuff. And I love what you mentioned around taking responsibility and just sort of looking yourself in the mirror and being like, yeah, this is all on me. But then again, that's scary, but at the same time, it's super empowering. And it just kind of makes me think of, the quote, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So I can only imagine how your friend group and just sort of pretty much everybody you interacted with would have been different from that point moving forward. And then you sort of fell into CrossFit. So were you always an athlete up until this point, or were you playing, like you said, you missed your senior year of football, but were you always into fitness and working out and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's the short answer is I played sports growing up. I played football, hockey, and lacrosse. I was a big hockey player, and sort of the same way, in the realm of CrossFit, where I really don't think that I'm really good at anything. I just try to work as hard as I can and hope things can go my way. And same thing when I was playing sports, where I'll never forget. I saw my dad. I saw him in the basement working out. He did like 70 push-ups or something. I'll never forget that. I was like, holy shit. I could barely do like 1, I was like in like 7th or 8th grade. And I was like, oh man. And I'll never forget my dad said to me, he's like, hey, you're probably never going to be the best or the most skilled on any team, but you can be the hardest worker and no one should outwork you. And I took that to heart because, and he's always, there's always going to be someone bigger, faster, stronger than you. Always. And, and that's when I started working out and, like doing push-ups and dips and sit-ups and just the stuff that you do in your basement when you're in, middle school. And that kind of started that spark. And then, like everything that progressed to me being, a meathead in high school and in the early years of college, where I just became a gym rat. So I was always into that. And when I found CrossFit, I was in the gym. I was like, when I would go at it in the gym, like I had something to lose, like I was training for nothing, but it came at a perfect time, because I'm sure we've all been in that boat when you're training in the gym and you kind of like, why the hell am I doing this? Why am I just busting my ass? And CrossFit gave me purpose, and it gave me direction in training. And that's where I found CrossFit in the very beginning, simply from a competitive perspective. I had no idea you could train people through CrossFit methodology, or you could be a CrossFit trainer. Like for me, it was like, oh, I'm going to compete. And that was something that was really, that changed the game for me.
That's super cool, man. And that kind of makes me think of how that all or nothing mentality can either work really hard against you or, really positively for you. So it sounds like you just went sort of all into the CrossFit thing. Ended up going to the games how many times?
5 times as an individual and 1 time as a team last year. So I've been 6 times to the games.
Wow, that's awesome. So how did you originally get hooked up with Reebok and basically running the gym at Reebok CrossFit One at the headquarters there? How'd you get into that?
So that was, again, life is funny where it's, right place, right time. And, if you see an opportunity, take it and do something with it. And so I went to the CrossFit Games in 2010, and I was able to finish good. I finished 6th, which was a good finish. And that was the year in 2010 when Reebok signed the contract with CrossFit to be the sponsor of the games. And so they reached out to me from a sponsorship perspective at that time. So I remember I went out to Canton where the headquarters was, and I met with everyone, and signed this contract, which was the craziest thing in the world. It was like, holy shit, I'm getting paid to work out and get free clothes. It was very surreal. And they were just starting their CrossFit affiliate at the time. And I just remember I was like, and I just said, I was like, I was coaching in Albany at the time before my wife had a job, my now wife, my girlfriend at the time. And I was like, if you ever need help or, support coach, let me know. And I threw my hat in the ring, and they're like, yeah, we'd love it. And they asked me to come out and start coaching at Reebok CrossFit 1. And that was how it started.
So did you start as the head coach there, or was there somebody else in place there, or how did that come to be? Because now you're running the show.
Yeah, so I started out as just like a coach. There was like kind of just the organization was a little different and the structure was different. And then from there, I was able to, like it was just a few classes, like anything back in the day with CrossFit. And over time, my goal was to expand and to grow where, we had at that time, like 1,200 employees on campus, and we just kept growing and growing. So I was able to grow my role to be the head coach of Reebok CrossFit 1. And that just happened organically, where it's like, all right, you're the head coach there. And, at the apex of what we were doing there, we had like 600 employees doing CrossFit. Now the whole facility, the entire corporate wellness facility. So it's, my role has since increased again to in charge of the whole corporate wellness facility, which is pretty cool and a huge honor.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. And I know that you're big on, integrating fitness into corporate culture. And it sounds like you guys have done a great job of that at Reebok there. So what are some of the standout benefits that you see from actually having a gym on campus at work, and then therefore some of these Reebok employees, just by default, probably going to take better care of themselves. They're staying active and probably, eating right, stuff like that. And that's got to contribute to work productivity and all that sort of good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I think you have two buckets, right? You have subjective data and you have objective data. And so I think the subjective data, for us in the industry, in the fitness and health world, it's beautiful, right? And I think from the CrossFit perspective, more specifically, community. I think in any time you have a corporate culture where you can have a transmission of culture, what I mean by that is, throughout the day, we'll have the president of the company work out next to interns, temps, and co-ops. I mean, it's an unbelievable mix that is so amazing for workplace morale, integration, for growth, and transition within the company. It's just so unique. And I think that's probably the coolest thing that we see. Where right now we have 90% of the employees members of our gym. Of that 90%, we're getting 80% to come in every week, which is amazing from a data perspective. So that's the objective stuff. Where like, all right, in the time of obesity and chronic disease and heart disease and type 2 diabetes, you name it, where we have this pandemic of 70% of deaths in the United States specifically are essentially from diseases that are preventable. And we have people coming to the gym and working out every day. The majority of the workforce. That's unbelievable. Now we're transitioning into the realm of preventative healthcare. And so I think that's probably, so you have the objective measurements of that, the subjective measurements that people are working out, they're healthy, they're happy, they're integrating, they're talking to one another. I mean, this is in a corporate culture where, I can't tell you how many times I heard when we first opened up Reebok CrossFit 1, where people met people in the gym for the first time, and they both have been working at the company for 20 years. Because think about it, as if you're in a massive company, why would certain people interact with other people depending on their roles, right?
Right.
It's so easily overlooked, but it's such a huge piece. So you have that wonderful aspect, and like you said, this education piece. Like right now, we're doing a wellness challenge at the gym, and we're signing people up, and we're teaching people about fitness, nutrition, hydration, sleep, meditation, and mindfulness, random acts of kindness, mobility. Like these are all aspects of the challenge where we have a direct line to helping people, and we look at it as our responsibility to help them. So it's cool to see that. So now at the very least, maybe we get 300 of the 600 people signed up, and now we get to empower that many more people with that much more information to improve their quality of life. And I think that's I know one of my big goals for this year is to essentially start to put the onus more on this corporate culture and corporate responsibility for preventative healthcare. And we're conducting some studies at the gym and doing stuff like that to let people know, one, what we're doing and how we're doing it, and that this needs to be scaled to essentially corporate America to give this to people. I mean, what we do at Reebok, and I think this is the most special thing that Reebok does as a brand and for their care for their employees, is that it's an incentive-based membership. So if you're a Reebok employee, you sign up for the gym, it's a $75 a month membership, which is pennies on the dollar compared to most gyms, right? Then every time they check in to the gym, they get a $7.50 credit. You check in 10 times, your gym membership is free for that month.
That's so cool.
So essentially, we're paying you to work out.
Right. Now, you might be familiar with Rob Wolf, and I'm pretty sure, I think he started the first and maybe fourth CrossFit affiliate ever. He, I guess, since has parted ways with CrossFit, but he really pushes the gym as primary care medicine. So,
yep.
And I just think that is so true. And I mean, it's basically the only way to go right now as far as approaches go, because what we're doing now isn't working. So
right.
When you're sending out, or how are you sending out these wellness programs to get people to sort of buy in? Are you getting people in the gym to, hey, tell your friend? Are you sending out mass emails? How are you getting people to get on board with this stuff?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So, and there's really only one way to do this, and it's human interaction. The only way that we're going to get people to sign up for the gym, to sign up for our wellness challenge, is to interact. We need to be interacting with people, getting to know people, talking to them, because that's when because I can get, so you, Marcus, you like fitness, you're involved with fitness. I say, hey, we're going to do this fitness thing. Are you in? You're in, right? You're easy. And no disrespect to your demographic, but I'm less worried about you. I'm more worried about the person that is not coming to the gym, the person that doesn't trust me because of whatever reason, they don't connect with me. And I need to have some sort of human interaction with them, or someone on my team does. And that's what we found, where we spend time in the main building. We get to know people. We talk to them. We look at ourselves as essentially like wellness and health officers that we need to go around, get to know people, and learn about them so we can help them. It's that simple, yet that difficult. And it's the same thing with leadership and managing a team, where the only way to be successful is to get to know someone and to have human interaction and for it to be positive, right? And that's the same thing, where if I say, or I ask someone today, hey, have you heard about our Be More Human Wellness Challenge? And they're like, no, I haven't, and I say, well, do you want to learn a little more about it? And, and then this gal said to me, she's like, well, yeah, I would, but I don't know. Like, I'm just really nervous about, that type of stuff. And we got talking, I got to know her. Next thing you know, she signed up. We set 2 small goals, and that's what we're going to work on for the 5 weeks, where that would have never have happened if I sent an email out. that would have never have happened if they just read a post on Instagram or a blog post that we posted up and shared with the company. You have to have that human interaction.
That's so cool, man. And I think that, touching back on what you said about community, CrossFit does a really, really good job of, knocking out a bunch of different sort of primary human needs. It's like you get the community, you get the social interaction, your friends are there, you guys do barbecues together, you have a couple beers, like everything. There's 5 things that get knocked out all in one shot with the gym. And so, or what are you doing differently than gyms that aren't successful? Because I know that a lot of people think about going to a CrossFit gym and they're just intimidated about it, right? Or any gym for that matter, right? It's just sort of intimidating to go to and start. So do you think that falls back on that human interaction thing as well, or just relating and being more personable?
I really think it does. It all falls back into this concept of marketing, where marketing doesn't really work past a certain degree. Where I can do some cheap and easy marketing and get some people interested that I wouldn't necessarily get interested. But, again, the only way, I know that if I talk to you, my goal is to educate you on what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. My goal is not to convince you to come to the gym. You're the only person that can do that, because I don't want someone at the gym that doesn't want to be there.
Right.
Because it doesn't work. I'm not going to do the work for you. I want the person that wants to be there. Now, the caveat to that is, how do we unlock someone's awareness that this is what they want, need, or should be doing? And how do we shepherd that journey? Everybody's different there. I know people that will only work with a personal trainer. They need personal accountability. They need to feel indebted to someone else, or else they're not going to do it, because it's not a priority to them. And I think it's easy to forget about those people. It's easy to forget about those that working out or exercise or whatever it is, it's not on their top 10. Other things are. But with the understanding and education, they'll have the awareness that they need to do it and they should be doing it. And we should be a part of that. And that has to happen through communication and interaction. And you need to be aware that maybe you aren't the right fit for them, and that's okay. Right? Where, listen, I know that anyone and everyone can do CrossFit, but if you're not willing to do the work today, then it's probably not the right fit for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, a good example is, I know at my gym, I have the best staff in the world. Nothing against any other staff. I just have some of the most credentialed from a CrossFit perspective, from a training perspective. They're top of the line. They work for CrossFit. They're level. I mean, you name it, they got it. And yet, and we have you name it, we have all the variables in a place. So why don't we have 100% of people doing CrossFit, right? Well, it's because it's not everyone's time, and some people just don't want to. How come someone starts doing CrossFit today and they've worked at the company for 5 years?
Right.
And but the answer is, don't worry about answering that question, because notice how they showed up. They're here today. Don't worry about where they were 5 years ago. Worry that they're here today and that you're doing something right because they're here today. And I think that's helpful, and continually to do that and to learn from them. Talk to them. Hey, what brought you in here? Why are you here? And talk to them. And maybe you learned something that you did incorrectly, or that others did incorrectly, that you can learn from their mistakes. But I think that's the best thing we can take from that type of interaction.
Love it. That's super insightful stuff, man. So how do you manage your nutrition and training, being that you're so busy traveling and you have 2 or 3 other gyms aside from CrossFit Reebok One? Is that correct?
Yeah. So I have 3 other gyms. I got CrossFit One Nation that I run with the team. We have One Nation in Boston, Waltham, and Needham, and then I also work for CrossFit. So I work on the level 1 and level 2 seminar staff team, as well as the CrossFit competitor course and a few other courses that I work with. So busy, absolutely. But the nice thing is that essentially I've phased into it over the past 9-10 years, where when I first started, I wasn't traveling 40 weekends a year like I am now.
Wow.
I was only just a handful here or there. But like anything, it's just like gradual, incrementalism as you build up. And that's how, if you say, hey, if you go from no weekends a year to 40 weekends a year, you're probably going to get beat up. You just learn tips and tricks. But one, training is a priority. Get it done. You don't feel good, who cares? You got to train. And then when you learn how to train like that from a competitive perspective, it's great, because you only feel fresh once when you compete, the first workout, and you only compete for 5 workouts in your home gym in the open. The rest is somewhere else. So learning how to be somewhere else and around others, it's great, because it actually trains you for what you know is going to happen, the unknown. The nutritional perspectives, gosh, it's so easy. Go to a grocery store and get your food for the weekend, and don't succumb to social pressures. It's easy. It's much easier said than done. But if you're a competitor, if you truly make it a priority, it is not hard, right? And if it's not if it's not on your top priority, live 80-20. It's not hard to go out to dinner and get a good piece of protein, some good carbohydrates and some healthy fats at a good restaurant. That's easy to do as well. But you just have to make it a priority and make it a focus.
That's amazing, man. I could talk to you all day, but I know that we're a little crunched for time here. You've been super generous with your time. So before we sign off here, can you let folks know where they can learn a bit more about you, your social handles, all that sort of stuff? Absolutely.
So you can, probably the best way to kind of communicate and learn about me right now is through Instagram. If you just hit me up on DM, it's just Malleolo, Malleolo, nothing crazy there. I'm fairly active on that, and I try not to get too preachy, but I tend to, just throw a lot of my philosophies up on that. And if you shoot me a note, I try to get back to them. I try to go through my DMs at once a week, so I don't get too backed up, but I try to get back to everyone. And that's probably where I'm the most active. And we do online programming as well. Myself and my buddy Spencer, we call it the HAM plan, the Hendel and Malleolo plan. So you can check us out on there too, from a training philosophy. And I do some online consulting and sort of some business stuff and some personal stuff. It's as well. So those are just some ways to reach me and reach out to me. But I just try to share my story and help out and be of service to people that want to be into that stuff.
I'm sure there'll be some CrossFit box owners listening to this stuff. You guys actually do programming for boxes. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. We do affiliate programming. It's probably my favorite thing that we do. So we program for gyms, and we provide weekly lesson plans and scaling options and all sorts of stuff. As an affiliate owner, as owning a couple gyms and having a big staff, I know how important it is to implement. So the biggest thing I say about that is it's, outsourcing programming is not for everyone, but, if it's something you're thinking about, I try to get on a phone call with everyone interested and just talk them through it. Because, I get the business model, and I get, that every cent matters. And I also get that our most valuable resource is not the money we make, it's the time that we spend. So that's why I like our affiliate programming, because it's to help that.
Very cool, man. I'll link to all that stuff in the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. And I think that people will get a lot out of that.
Absolutely. No, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. We'll catch you next time. Signing off. See ya.